And joining us via the Jack Spring Electric Keel Newsmaker Hotline, State Representative Alan Seabaugh. Hey, Mr. Allen, happy Monday. Welcome back to Keel. How you been?
I've been fine. How are y'all?
Let's talk a little bit, starting off fine, thank you, by the way. Let's start off with the governor's race, the big picture. A win for John Bell, not such a good night for the Republicans, at least in that race, and Eddie Rispone. What did you think about that? Why do you think, if you'd care to venture an opinion, what went wrong on the Rispone side?
Well, a lot went wrong on the Rispone side, but you need to start with John Bell. When you're running against an incumbent, the advantage is always with the incumbent. And John Bell Edwards did a really good job of convincing enough moderate swing voters around the state that he's not actually as liberal as he is. I mean, he did a really good job of hoodwinking some of the swing voters, and he did an excellent job of turning his vote out. African-American vote, especially in Orleans Parish, was up double digits. So he did a really good job of getting his vote out. I mean, he won New Orleans Parish by 101,000 votes, and he won the overall election by 40,000. So he did a good job of turning his vote out. On the Rispone side, his campaign was a hot mess from the beginning. I mean, he never really talked about any specifics. All he said was that he loved Trump. And if you go back and look at Louisiana political history, every time a Republican has tried to nationalize a statewide election, they've lost. I mean, you can go all the way back to Bob Livingston in 1987 or Henson Moore in 86. I mean, when a Republican tries to nationalize a state election, it doesn't really work. And all Rispone, the only thing people remember about Rispone's campaign was Trump, Trump, Trump. And that's not enough. And he didn't really get into the weeds. He didn't get specific. And quite frankly, what he did is he brought in a bunch of relatively young political consultants who had run campaigns successfully in other states that had no clue about Louisiana politics. So it was a combination of a fairly well-run campaign by John Bell trying to thread the needle again and a hot mess on the Republican side.
So entering this year's legislative session, John Bell Edwards facing a super Republican majority or Republican supermajority in both houses of the legislature. Is
Not
he?
Not quite.
Not quite?
Not quite. I don't mean to interrupt you, but the House came 2 votes short. We had a supermajority would be 70. The House has 68 Republicans. So there is a supermajority in the Senate. We're 2 votes short of a supermajority in the House.
That may end up being a pretty big deal, don't you think? I mean, I have proffered the thought that going into this legislative session that John Bell may be the most insignificant governor in Louisiana history. What do you think about that?
Well, I still think that's true, especially in the House. By virtue of what we did 4 years ago and for the past 4 years with conservatives in leadership positions, we're set to elect a speaker and a leadership team without any consultation or involvement from the governor's office. I don't know that the Senate is ready to do that. If you look at the Senate, and again, there's more Republicans percentage-wise in the Senate than the House, but there's more conservatives in the House. And if you look at the Senate, the true conservatives in the Senate are all freshmen. There are very few returning. I mean, other than Barrow Peacock and 2 or 3 others, there are very few returning senators that are true conservatives. Most of the true conservatives are freshmen, and they're not really ready to take over leadership positions. So I think the House is set to pick a speaker and a leadership team in place to continue standing up to and opposing the governor when he gets off the reservation. I hope that the Senate can do the same, but I'm a little bit less optimistic.
You're headed to Baton Rouge. Is it for legislative business today?
Yes.
And what's going on?
Well, I don't really want to say.
Oh, okay. Let me ask you this.
Let me say it involves exactly what we're talking about.
I was going to ask
you.
Get
specific.
Are you in line to be House Speaker? Is that still a possibility for Alan Seabaugh?
It's still a possibility. I'm still a candidate. Obviously, the election of John Bell makes it a little more difficult for me. But yes, I'm still a candidate. It is still a possibility. It's still on the table. But admittedly, my chances took a step backwards Saturday night.
Let me ask you this.
But
what can John Bell Edwards do via executive order? Could he write an executive order, for example, to raise minimum wage?
No. I mean, he could try. I mean, he did it. He's already done a couple of executive orders that we brought him to court and won and said you can't do that. He tries to rule or govern by legislate, is the word I'm looking for, by executive order, and you simply can't do that. So he could try. He could write one, but it would be blatantly unconstitutional, and we would have it overturned in court fairly easily.
On the other hand, he is, if nothing else, a pretty savvy politician. And this is, as the phrase goes, not his first rodeo. How do you expect, having dealt with him, having opposed him, having seen him work for the last 4 years, hell, even before that in the legislature, what do you expect from the governor over the next 4 years?
With the leadership races, I don't expect him to make the mistake he did 4 years ago in trying to pick a liberal Democrat. I expect him to try to pick a liberal Republican that he can work with and try to put a coalition together there. So that's what we're trying to fend off first and foremost. From a legislative standpoint, it's going to be interesting. The answer to your question is going to be determined by who controls the Senate. What he did for the last 4 years is absolutely, completely refused to negotiate with the House. The House was run by conservatives, and we kept sending conservative bills and conservative budgets and things, and he absolutely refused to budge $1 on any line. He didn't negotiate with the House at all, and he did that because he knew he controlled the Senate. And anything that we wanted, the Senate would flip, and you're looking at a Mexican standoff between the House and the Senate, and in that, the Senate usually wins that debate. So he knew he controlled the Senate, so he didn't negotiate. And the answer to your question is going to be determined by who the Senate elects as their Senate president and who controls the Senate.
Help me out with this, because I believe it may have been actually on his first day in office, he signed an executive order expanding Medicaid, and that executive order has held up. Why are some okay and some not?
Well, because he didn't assume a legislative function by doing that. The legislature had tried to expand Medicaid, or the members of the legislature had tried to expand Medicaid under Jindal, and it had always been voted down. But the way he did it by executive order, and again, he didn't make that up. He followed the path of other governors in other states who had gotten around legislatures that were refusing to do it by signing executive orders. And other people beat him to the punch, and he simply copied what others had done.
Last one here, Alan. Are you, as a staunch conservative, as that what I call that trinity of no in the most admirable way, you, Raymond Cruz, Dodie Horton, etc., are you optimistic going forward, or is it basically going to be what you said a couple of seconds ago, just a standoff with the governor for the next 4 years?
Well, I'm not as optimistic as I was at 8 o'clock Saturday night. My optimism dwindled about 10:30. But with looking forward with John Bell, I am more optimistic than I was 4 years ago, and I'll tell you why. There were several of us election night. We were with David Vitter at his campaign headquarters, and we circled the wagons, and we talked about John Bell. As a legislator, he was a phenomenal politician. As leader of the Democrats in a minority function in the House, he absolutely controlled the legislature, controlled the House, and did a great job of kicking our tails, and he was a good politician. Once he became governor, I think he forgot everything that he learned because he's done nothing but stumble over his own feet. From trying to force a Democrat speaker to his speech about canceling LSU football and kicking grandma out of the nursing home, he's made one really boneheaded political mistake after another. Other than his campaign, he's really bumbled over his own feet multiple times on multiple issues. We thought he was going to kick our butts for 4 years, and quite frankly, he didn't. It could have been a whole lot worse had the House Republicans not stuck together, elected our own speaker, and moved forward in the way that we did. So we were able to stall a lot of things. What I expect to see differently in the 4 years coming up is more vetoes. He didn't have to veto that many bills in his first term because the Senate killed everything that he would have had to veto. The Senate didn't pass a single bill that he didn't like. The only things he vetoed were on technical grounds. I expect more vetoes in the next session, a lot. And I do think we're going to have some veto override votes. I'm not saying we're actually going to get the 2/3, but we make them close. So I do expect more vetoes and a little bit more of a fight just simply because the numbers have shifted drastically in our direction on both houses. This is the most Republicans we've ever had in the legislature in the past century and a half. And not only more Republicans, but more staunch conservatives in both houses. So if he thought he had a problem with the House 4 years ago, for the last 4 years, he hadn't seen anything yet because it's going to be much more heavily weighted our direction in the next 4 years than it was in the last four. So again, I expect more vetoes. I expect more fights. And if he continues to take his my way or the highway, I refuse to negotiate on anything, we're going to have a standoff. If he does what Bill Clinton did, quite frankly, if you look at on a federal level, when the Republicans took over both houses of Congress, Clinton moderated a lot, and they were able to pass some things like welfare reform and some balanced budgeting. I mean, that wasn't Clinton's idea. That was the Republicans in Congress's idea. He just went along and got credit for some actually pretty good things that passed because he worked with the other side. And again, it's up to John Bell. If he wants to meet us halfway and negotiate with us, we can actually move the state forward and fix some of the problems. We're not going to be able to fix all of them, but we can fix some. But if he continues to dig his heels in and say, I'm not going to negotiate, it's my way or the highway, then it's going to be a really, really rough 4 years.